Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Collinwood for YouTube. I'm back to do a read along of the Dark Shadows Daybook Unbound. Sorry for the delay, guys. Um, Episode 1113, I'm still in Chapter 6. Barnabas Collins decides that the only man who can help him avert the apocalypse is the last man he can trust himself. Barnabas, Jonathan Frid. Gerard thinks he has Julia by the short hairs when he dangles a new found earring in front of her as evidence that she comes from another time. Her explanation is credible enough to send Gerard away, leaving her time to conspire with Ben Stokes about recruiting Barnabas for the campaign. Ben finds Barnabas in the old house, saying goodbye to Josette's portrait and dominance over his future. As he reasons with the vampire, the present day version of Barnabas consults with Ben's descendant, surrounded by an insane Carolyn and a suicidal Quentin. Barnabas is compelled to use the I Ching wands to take the battle to 1840. He immediately encounters the vision of Julia's grave. Dark Shadows is turning to its most forbidden topic endings. The job of a soap opera is to perpetuate misery. It resolves one source only after it slides in another. But this phase of the show is replete with endings, conclusions, and assorted apotheoses. We've seen Collinwood destroyed, and that's how the ending begins. How do you top that? That kind of question surges within 1113 with urgent power. It begins with the fatalism and then asks, is that all you got? This is the perverse optimism that you find only at funerals, because when the universe falls apart, the only certainty is change. With Barnabas, we we even see double. The show continues its audacious presentation of parallel storylines, two different centuries with overlapping cast and one character appearing in both. The most unique acting challenge for Jonathan Frid is playing two different versions of Barnabas, both of whom have their counterparts in the relative future. And Dark Shadows is the only show where the future is 130 years in both directions. This storyline has a bad rap for being confusing. I suppose if you struggle to do things like drop pennies and straighten a knotted rope, you'll find this baffling. But if you can manage those arduous tasks, 1840 is a pleasure. Barnabas Collins may be the long suffering and occasionally non beating heart of Dark Shadows, but Julia Hoffman is its soul. Drop me a line if you can relay explanation on the difference. But it sounds good. Following her into 1840, it's clear how far she has come. She began as a conniving, intellectual, ruthless, arrogant invader. If Collinwood tortures its beloved sons and daughters, you can imagine when an outsider puts it in a bad mood. Julia pays her dues. Now she is on the other end of that process. Her scene at the beginning of the episode is a well earned tribute to smugness. She deflects Gerard's smarmy interrogation with a cool efficiency that borders on descendant relish. Julia knows that she could die at any point. She knows that she is far over her abundant coffee head. Not only is she fearless, but she has learned to take pleasure in hosting her enemies with extra petard. Supernatural bullies specialize in lording forbidden knowledge over the rest of us. As Julia frustrates their efforts, her sense of take that is not only admirable, it's infectious. Had Victoria Winters remained on the show, this is the main character we might have gotten, although I doubt it. Julia's age, gumption, and gall are impossible to imagine with anyone else. We are seeing Dan Curtis's dream after all, just by the way of the real world. Meanwhile, Barnabas finally takes down the painting of Josette. After all, she let go of him, and she has given him the permission to move on. That's on her end. This is a matter of his own choice. It involves the sort of courage that people can only show when they are too close a tragedy. There is a grace period in the time immediately following a tragedy before its burdens become a part of us. All the decommissioning Josette is a job that could only be accomplished by the 1840 version of Barnabas and the 1970 version of Barnabas. Anything in between had just enough time to become obsessed with his loss, but not enough experience to contemplate life without it. Barnabas is speaking for himself and the writers when he boasts, "The word safe has no meaning for me." It's an extraordinary point of freedom. Everything is possible because nothing is possible. It's the same kind of desperate bravery shown by the producers as they introduce a backward echo of Pansy Faye with the nobler ancestor Letitia Faye. It's a character whose existence has no practical sense, but has such a poetic ring of truth that pedantic cavils are undone before they can be spoken. Letitia is there because it's the most interesting continuing character that Nancy Barrett crafted. And because Nancy Barrett intrinsically belongs at Collinwood as its neurotic and self punishing ray of light, and who has the time to wallow in trivia when they have a 50-year-old soap opera to write about. One of the story's primal themes is the decay of our aspirations over time. The introduction of Letitia manages to accomplish this backward. Somehow, Letitia is an ancestor of Pansy. And it may just be the somatic impact of a more natural hair color. Letitia feels a little more humane and relatable. And she's not the only double in the episode. Letitia is confident in her use of the supernatural. But Nancy Barrett also plays the vaguely psychic Carolyn in 1113. Her encounter with the paranormal has driven her quite mad. Pitting the two characters against each other, similarly, we have a scene in 1840 where Ben Stokes reasons with his former master to show courage and trust. This transitions to a scene over a century later in the same house where Elliot Stokes shows a newly dawning sense of hesitation and Barnabas must relay him into action. Moments before the 1970 Barnabas is introduced under a looming portrait of himself from Higher and Happier Days, he is attached to his chair, Hamleting himself to the point that a skull may appear in his palm at any moment. Barnabas is either on the verge of implosion or explosion. He seethers with Stokes. Report on the funerals for Carrie, Daphne, Elizabeth, and the assassinated future of the Collins family. David, these are unthinkable, bold, and paramount strokes of storytelling, and they engage Barnabas as they engage us. He has spent his second and third lives doubting his place in the future, and has suddenly passed him by. It is in this moment that Barnabas truly appreciates the ability that makes him unique. He alone can use the curse of immortality to travel within his own lifespan in either direction for the trip to 1897. This discovery was an accident. Now its invocation is a mandate. Barnabas rallies to a rare moment of decisive and ferocious action. At the thought he can only be haunted by the past for so long. Within the space of just a few lines, this gentleman of the past again becomes the last best hope for the future. A year ago, this might have been executed with a sense of insolent Elin worthy of Alexander Dumas. Fred avoids letting any twinkle spark his eye. Too many people have died. Too many regrets filled the ledger. Yes, he has. Yes, he is answering the call to adventure, but it is with gravitas and respect, and yet again the series reinvents itself. Too often, he is written off as a villain, literally defamed after his first few months. I will admit, he spends a frustrating amount of time doubting his next move. But even when Barnabas is at his most mournfully indecisive, he is to me the great man. It's in scenes like these today that we see why, in fact, those other moments of ethical denial and over intellectual parallels are what makes episodes like 1113 such a joy. And the universe surrounding him seems to be in an agreement. Even Elliot argues with him about the risks of such a journey. Carolyn glides downstairs for a late afternoon cocktail and yet another nervous breakdown as Quentin tries to hang himself upstairs. As if to prove Barnabas's point, once Barnabas tries a tentative trance, the first thing he sees is Julia Hoffman's tombstone from 1840. A call to adventure indeed. And you wanted to talk about risk, Professor Stokes. Let's talk about risk. Risk may be James T. Kirk's business, but for Barnabas Collins, it is his very life. And I can say the same for Dan Curtis. This episode was broadcast September 30th, 1970. Episode 1118. Will Gerard's plans for domination over Collinwood change when he meets his lone sleeping guardian, Barnabas Jonathan Fripp? Barnabas establishes a relationship with Daniel as he challenges the story with Quentin's drowning. Meanwhile, Judah Zachary attacks Ben Stokes. It's like the past 2 years or so never happened, and that's a surprisingly good thing. It's good because for all of the explained mythos and wonder brought by Nicholas, Quentin, and Count Patofe, we've spent the past couple of years expanding the mythos without always connecting it. It's tough to realize until you see Daniel Collins and Ben Stokes ruminating about the doomed nature of the family as a primal force of nature. Mr. Beale, even though Daniel is a different actor and he really isn't in the cosmic sense, in a cosmic isn't in a cosmic sense, and Ben's face is an unrecognizable topography of the malignant we know we're home. Beyond Liz and Rogers seething over brandy and things unsaid, this is home. And when we hear them, these heralds and descendants of elder gods like Joshua and Naomi speak of the Bedford murders, we take it seriously. It akens to hearing parents talk about some heretofore unmentioned childhood disease that almost got us before we could understand what it meant to be sick. 1840 is just close enough to home, and by that I think we all know I mean 1795. That its tarnish hurts more than the strangeness of 1897. When Lewis Edmonds, Daniel shows lucidity, our hearts soar as profoundly as they crash when he descends into Babel. In this episode, his embrace of Barnabas and his insistence that he take the old house both save time and ring with the rightness that makes him one with the viewers. It's about effing time, and it's what we would do too. After all, who is Daniel but the first of the first generation of kids to grow up watching Dark Shadows? That strange energy resonates through the character, and right at the viewers. At last, Barnabas is not a stranger. Is Daniel crazed enough to see him as safe, or safe enough not to listen to his inner child whispering numbers of danger? Who cares? Barnabas is back in business with considerably less situational guano to wad through. Early in the episode, Ben correctly notes that Barnabas isn't the same man that he was just scant moments before. The transformation from beleaguered baddie to decisive hero is a tribute naturally to Jonathan Frid and the writers. But it's also a reason to reflect on the uniqueness and relative longevity of the show. These are vastly different characters and completely understandably the same man. Just like Daniel, Barnabas has ascended twice now. If his seizure of the heroic mantle didn't grab us the first time, in the choices he makes regarding Eric Glenn and Nicholas Blair, then we cannot help but cheer him on now as he fully rebounds from this his fall with the Leviathans and failures in Ragnarok. 1897 was not a fluke, nor was it fantasy roleplay. You can beat your Lindens that it was Barnabas's training ground, and it was proof to him that just has no just as no time is truly his, all times are truly his as well. His comfort with command and decisive problem solving speaks to the best that he will be all of who he was in 1897, with the mellow knowledge of how rare and decisive the status is. This is. Like Frieder in Metropolis, Barnabas is protagonist somewhere between the hands and the mind. Whenever either is the solution, he and we are quietly pleased because we didn't know he had it in him. He's smart, but he's no Nicholas Blair, and he's strong, but few, save fireplace poking, bending Elliot Stokes, are stronger than Adam. It's fitting that the last son of Collinwood appears in the same episode with with his match, Judah Zachary. A being of literal pure mind, it's a tribute to the alien intensity of actor Michael Maguire that Zachary is a character of such credible opposites. There's blazing eyed malevolence mixed with a strange, fearful sense of being lost that I would imagine accompanies being a nearly open, disembodied head in a glass box. All kidding aside, after the foes Barnabas has bested, it's appropriate that he stare down not just one from the past, but of all past. His nemesis is the embodiment of the abstract. Defeating him will require not just Barnabas's wit and physical prowess, but the exploration of the inhuman heart. He cannot solve Judah Zachary while beating the kind of binary thinker that created Judah Zachary. Barnabas has reformed morally. 1840 will require him to go further. The first order of business is to force him to do so without Ben Stokes. You cannot go home again. Home always changes. Yet it might be a place that forces you to change with it. This episode was broadcast October 7th, 1970. Episode 1124. Can Barnabas evade the son of the man he murdered before Judah Zachary claims another life? Lamar Trask, Jerry Lacey. Armed with a letter disclosing the potential true identity of Barnabas Collins, Lamar visits Collinwood to force the brash Englishman's hand. Meanwhile, at Rose Cottage, a man once possessed by the head of Judah Zachary confronts a haunted Desmond, dying in the process. Maybe today this isn't the Dark Shadows Daybook, it might be the Trask House Daybook, because I think we've stumbled into another series. What a marvelous episode that charges out of the gate, giving us just the opening narration, an absolute banquet of intrigue, occult weirdness, and reasons to keep watching. The episode absolutely delivers, with actors like John Carlin and Nancy Barrett still finding new colors in their performances and a script that has genuine intrigue and dread. If you've seen the rest of the series, parts of it may feel familiar, and Bolero quickly familiarizes us with itself. And that's the point. It's a burgeoning experience that intentionally maintains a simplicity that reveals a mounting complexity and grandeur each go around, sur- surprising us with what it contained all along. Yes, Bolero, but with Donna Wandery instead of Bo Derek. And it's a pretty good trade. After all, Donna Wandery never said they're washing me like a horse while expecting to be taken seriously in subsequent features only Sarah David could pull that off. Even though it's at the start of the much maligned 1840 storyline, this is a solidly rambunctious way to introduce someone to the series. When it begins, Desmond is possessed by a haunted head. Quentin has drawn the death card in the tarot deck. We find out that Kate Jackson is there to murder Quentin, and Barnabas is doing everything he can to win the current woman of his dreams away from, well, himself. He's always had to live down his nocturnal activities, but this is the most extreme case yet. As he tries to make up for the cod he was just a few days and yet hundreds of years ago kind of compounded. That's really before any dialogue starts. What a welcome to Collinwood. Considering what people have to walk through in the first episodes of the show just to get the whole vampire part. This is like pressing the accelerator on the McLaren and then you kill off a Pagoda. Nothing against Abe, but if it worked for Coppola, Coppola, it could work for Curtis. Abe, it's just business. However, wedged in between that terrific opening and the climax where supernatural forces victimize Vagoda, and feel free to go back and read the phrase as many times as you want. We are actually stepping into a parallel universe. Well, kind of, and more interestingly than we ever did with Parallel Time, because for just a moment we step into the sister series of Dark Shadows. It's the series that never got made, but the series that makes all the sense in the world. Its star, Jerry Lacey, is he the villain? Yeah, if you're Collins, but that's a particularly pretzelized moral bar. Take a step back, get an objective view of the ethical landscape that mercifully vanishes at Widow's Hill. We take a degree of heroism for granted. On the show, because vampires are cool and we like Jonathan Fripp, it's easy to forget that these are pretty reprehensible people. Is there an alternative? Maybe for a blip in 1840, the House of Trask for a period. They are the other white meat of prominent Collinsport families. Yes, they are working class, and yes, they haven't been there as long, and no, they don't stay as long, but they nevertheless have a place. And you could very easily make a multi generational supernatural TV series just based on that dynasty. One of the things that brings this into focus is the stunning performance of Jerry Lacey, an actor so good that we take him for granted. It can be a curse for good actors because they make it look so effortless. In 1124, Lacey could easily win a bet on who the dashing and dark romantic lead really is. He is just as intense unpredictable, and determined as any vampire, and perhaps as commandingly seductive when he is alone with the woman in the episode. He summons up a surprisingly deep well of passionate intensity, yes, judgmental, but not without a powerful sense of desire. As he draws Letitia Fay into using her psychic abilities for his own ends, he shows a new and powerful side to the Trask archetype. For once, nothing is forbidden to him by the cloth. Poor Barnabas only comes back into the drawing room to save his own keister seconds before being outed. With Lacey in brief control of the drama, Jonathan Frid plays the weasel pedal to an extent that even outlines the best of John Carlin. As hard as he can possibly can, it's a delight. And he continues when he gets back home like a cartoon character. Trask has let himself in there also and is so calm and collected I am surprised he's not smoking Barnabas's pipe and correcting his password. Also. Briefly, Trask, the hero of a different show, has somehow wandered into the program, where the visitors of history have written him and his family as the bad guys. His father was a badass witch hunter, reportedly tortured and starved to death when he dared to pursue the servants, lovers, and accessorites of a vengeful and aristocratic vampire. He never knew the old man, but he certainly knows of his legend and suffered his absence. Fascinated with the strange dance of life and death, unable to afford medical school, Lamar Trask has clearly studied voraciously. He's well versed in the law, of course, a historical trial coast his future, coast his father, his future, even in 1840. The only way to learn about bodies and anatomy, sort of becoming a music hall entertainer, was to become a mortician. Makes you think maybe he didn't get into the line because he's creepy. He might have followed that pursuit for an entire logical reason. The Collins family is a menace. Look at the Collinses that he has to deal with. There's Gabriel, who is not exactly the life of the party. Then you have Quentin and Desmond, who have the incredibly poor judgment to do things like build unguarded, unstable time portals, become best friends with Gerard Stiles, and consider the severed head of a nefarious occultist to be a great gift for his brother. Yes, yes. The whole town loses either way there. If you think it's the perfect gift, you're a danger to the entire town. If Flora is so nutty that it is the perfect gift, you're a danger to the entire Western Hemisphere. As a warm up, yeah, these are the normative characters. These are the people who are supposed to we are supposed to trust. Sorry. Topping it, Trask has a letter from his father absolutely outing what went on shortly before his mysterious death, doing so with irrespectively, and who shows up? The identical son of his father's killer, wielding ungodly social power and wealth, a man who potentially has the powers of hell at his fingertips, and he's suddenly on a first name basis with your former Lois Lane. Bolero again, but not just ascending. By this point, it's inverting and twisting like a trapeze artist determined to see how far their bravery and recklessness can take their art in 1840. The show is still in midair, and maybe that's where it remained. Of course, the eventual fact that Lamar is a ruthless and unethical bigot has to crash the party, taking Dark Shadows back to the reality, which is not only where it where it belongs, but what it defines. This episode was broadcast October 15th, 1970. All right, guys, I'm going to stop for right there. When I pick up, it'll be episode 1149. I will read this for you tomorrow. You guys have a great day. Bye bye.